The Runaway Soup and Other Stories by Micaiah Montine, illustrated by Tom Cook. The Runaway Soup. One cold monster morning, Grover woke up and said, "Today is a day to stay home in bed. But oh, how I wish I had something hot. A big bowl of soup would just hit the spot." Some hot steamy soup in a big roomy dish. A stream of cream soup was Grover's one wish. He knew just wishing would not do much good, but then Grover thought of something that would. "I will cook up some soup. I will surprise everyone. And when they wake up, the soup will be done." So in the biggest big pot he could find, Grover cooked up a soup that was one of a kind. "I will start with tomatoes, peppers, and peas, noodles and celery, peanuts and cheese. I will add a few pumpkins and gooseberry jam, and some radishes, carrots, some beans, and a yam, some pancakes and pickles, and might taste very nice. And what would soup be without adding some rice?" He stirred it all up with a long wooden spoon. Then, smiling, he said, "It should be done soon." The soup started to humming inside of the pot. Then it started growing, and it grew a lot over the oven and onto the floor. That soup started heading right out of the front door. "Stop!" Grover cried. "Please do not run away." But the soup would not stop. That soup would not stay. Oh, that soup to go was going gone. On its way out of the door and across the front lawn, it bubbled it along in a fat soupy stream, as each monster woke from his own monster dream. They opened their eyes, they opened their doors, to find Runaway Soup had covered their floors. One monster howled and one gave a whoop, as they all followed the Grover's wild Runaway Soup. It ran down Main Street and then through the back ways. It looked like that soup could keep running for days. But at Sesame Corner past Alphabet Bend, that soup missed a turn and it hit a dead end. The monsters would follow that hot soupy path, when slipping and sliding into a soup bath. They had soup in their fur. They had soup soggy cloves. They had soup everywhere from their heads to their toes. "Oh no," Grover cried, "look at what I have done." But his friends only laughed and said, "It's been fun. For we've eating soups with names and that sounds silly, like chowder and gumbo and pepper pot chili. But we've never seen or yet heard about a fast soup to go that could take itself out. So if you decide to make soup again soon, remind us to bring a big bowl and a spoon." Then, the runaway hat. Ernie's favorite hat is the one that Bert gave him. One spring afternoon, Ernie put on his favorite hat and went for a walk in the park. There were there were tiny new green leaves on the trees. There were red and yellow tulips in the flower beds. The wind began to blow. At first it was a gentle breeze and soft as a whisper. But then the wind grew stronger and it blew harder and harder. Ernie felt a sudden gust and reached it up to hold his hat on his head, but he was not as fast as the wind. The wind blew his hat right off his head and lifted it into the air. "Stop!" Ernie cried as he ran after his hat. "Don't run away, hat." But his hat did not stop, and the wind did not stop. It blew harder and harder, and it carried Ernie's hat away higher and higher in the air. Ernie looked and looked, but he could not find his hat. "It has to be around here somewhere," he said. "Hats do not just disappear." It was getting late. Ernie was cold and tired and hungry. "Wherever you are, Blue Hat," Ernie shouted into the wind, "stay there. I will be right back to find you tomorrow." His head felt very lonely without his hat as he walked home sadly to Sesame Street. Ernie came back the next day to look for his hat. He came back the day after that, and the day after that too. And every day Ernie looked at in a different place. He looked at under park benches and picnic tables and trash cans. He looked at over fences and hedges and gates and Ernie looked around and through and in everything he could think of, but he did not find his hat. "I give up," Ernie said, sighing, as he sat down under a large oak tree. Just then a robin began to sing. Ernie looked up and saw the robin in the tree. He also saw his hat. "I'm coming to save you," Ernie called to his hat, and he climbed it up the tree as quickly as he could. But when he reached the limb, there was something in Ernie's hat, and it was not a head. "Birds will never believe this," said Ernie. The robin had built a nest in Ernie's hat, and in the nest were 3 beautiful blue eggs. "What a silly nest," said Ernie. "I can't take my head back until the mother robin's eggs are hatched." So every day Ernie went to the park to visit his hat. Soon he saw cracks in the eggshells. Then he saw beaks breaking through the cracks. Finally, the baby rabbits came out of the shells. "Wow," said Ernie. "I can't take my head back until the baby birds are bigger." So Ernie sat in the tree and watched it as the mother bird brought her baby's wiggly worms to eat. "Cheep, cheep," the baby bird sang all summer. Ernie waited and Ernie watched it. The baby birds grew bigger and stronger. "I can't take my hat back until the babies are big enough and strong enough to fly away," he said. Summer was almost over, and the days were growing shorter. The leaves began to turn red and orange and yellow. Then one day when Ernie went to visit his hat, the oak tree was quiet. The nest was empty. So Ernie sat in the tree and waited, but the birds did not come. The bird family must must have gone to the warm place for the winter, said Ernie sadly. Well, at least I can have my hat back now, he said. Ernie carried the hat down from the tree. He shook up all the twigs, and out fell a long, beautiful feather. Birds will never believe this, said Ernie. The birds left a present for me, and he put the feather in the band of his hat. The wind was blowing as Ernie walked in home to Sesame Street, and this time he held onto his hat. A short story by Little Bird. If you are little, if you are small, if you're not big and not very tall, you can fit into very small places, out of the way, snuggly spaces. If you are small, it is easy to send if your little self to your very best friend. If you are little, you can sleep anywhere, a drawer or a slipper or under a chair. Okay. When you are little, traveling's easy to do. In a pocket or backpack, you have a great view. When you are little, small foods are the best. Serve raisins and peas to your little guest. Though most of my friends are not very small, for me being little is no problem at all. The end.